Welcome. This is Soothing Whispers ASMR. As always, if there are any sounds or words you would like to hear me perform, please leave them below in the comments. Tonight, I thought we could enjoy the tale of the Goose Girl by the Brothers Grimm. There was once a very, very old woman who kept a flock of geese in a lonely place. Every morning she hobbled on her crutches into the fields and forest. Here she gathered grass for her geese and wild fruit for herself. These she carried home on her back. If she met anyone, she spoke in a friendly way. "Good morning, friend. We are having fine weather today. You wonder how I drag this heavy load? Ah, each one of us must carry his own load." But friendly and pleasant as she was, people began to say she is a witch, or she could not carry such loads. They would go out of their way to keep from meeting her. "Don't go near that old woman," they said to the children. "She is a witch." One morning a young man came whistling through the woods. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, the breeze was blowing. Everything seemed full of joy. For a time he met no one. At last he came to the old woman kneeling to cut grass. Already she had a large basket almost full, and by her side were two baskets, one full of pears, the other of apples. "Good morning, old woman," said the young man. "Surely you will not try to carry that load by yourself?" "Ah, but I must," said the old woman. "Rich people need not do such hard work, but it is different with us poor folk. I must carry it unless you do it for me. You are young and have a straight back and strong legs. For you the load would not be so great." The young man pitied the old woman. So he said, "My father is a rich count, and I have never carried such a load. But to prove that I have both the will and the power to help you, I will do this." "I shall be very thankful if you will," said the old woman. "My house is not more than an hour's walk away. There are the bag and the two baskets to carry, but that is not much of a load for you." The young count took the bag on his back, and the old woman hung the baskets on his arms. "See, are they not light?" she asked. "No, indeed," said he. "The bag is as heavy as if it were full of lead, and the pears and apples are like so many stones." He would have liked to put down a part of his load, but she would not let him. See now, she said, the fine young man cannot bear a load which an old woman like me carries. You are ready with fair words, but not with deeds. It was bad enough while the young Count was on level ground, but soon he came to a hill. The stones rolled from under his feet, and he could hardly drag himself forward. Good woman, he said, before I go farther, I must rest a while. Oh, no, no, she said, not yet. When you reach the end of your journey, it will be time to rest. You are unkind and ungrateful, cried the young Count. He tried to throw aside the bag, but it stuck as fast as if it had grown to his back. Twist and turn as he might, he could not get free. You are making yourself as red in the face as a turkey rooster, said the old woman. But it does no good. As you have begun, you must carry the load to the end. What could he do? Nothing except give up and go to the old woman's house. My old bones are tired, she said, after they had walked far up the hill. She made a spring and seated herself on the bag. Although she seemed so thin and light, her weight almost bowed the young man to the ground. What I have begun, I must finish, he said to himself. So he went on as well as he could. When he was so tired that he was almost ready to drop, he reached the old woman's cottage. The geese saw her and stretched out their necks and ran to her, cackling with all their might. Behind the flock walked a girl, big and strong, but dark and ugly as night. Mother, she said, has anything happened? What makes you so late? Never fear, my daughter, said the old woman. I had no bad luck, but rather good. This young Count brought my load home. When I was tired, he even carried me on his back. She took the bag and baskets from the young man. Go, sit on that bench beside the door and rest, she said. You have earned your reward, and you shall have it. Then she turned to the Goose Girl and said, Go into the house, my daughter. If you stay here, this young man may lose his heart to you, and that would be sad. The young Count did not know whether to laugh or to cry. To think of my losing my heart to an ugly, awkward goose girl, he said to himself. The old woman stroked and petted her geese as if they had been children. Then she went into the house. The young Count stretched himself on the bench under an apple tree. He looked out upon a green meadow where grew thousands of flowers. Through the meadow flowed a beautiful, clear stream. It is lovely here, he said, but I am too tired to enjoy the sight. I will lie here and sleep a while before I start home. I can only hope the wind will not blow my legs away. I have not the strength to hold them on. He fell asleep and slept until the old woman came and waked him. "Get up," she said, "you must not stay here. I did not treat you well at first, but I will make up for it all." So saying, she gave him a small box cut out of an emerald. "Take care of this," she said, "and it will bring you good luck." The young Count jumped up, and to his surprise felt quite rested and strong again. He thanked the old woman for her gift and set forth, meaning to go home at once. But he lost his way and wandered about for 3 days and 3 nights. At last he came to a great castle, and there the servants carried him before the king and queen. He took out the beautiful little emerald box and gave it to the queen. She opened it and looked in, and at once fell down as if dead. The king's servants seized the young count and were about to lead him off to prison. But the queen opened her eyes and said, "Let everyone leave the room except the stranger. I must speak to him alone." For a time the queen wept so that she could not speak. At last she said, "You may think it strange that a queen should weep. Listen, and I will tell you the cause of my grief. I once had 3 daughters, and of them all the youngest was fairest and best. Her brow was white as snow, her cheeks were like apple blossoms, and her hair shone like sunbeams. When she wept, pearls fell from her eyes instead of tears. When she was 15, my husband sent for our 3 daughters to come before him. Then he spoke, 'My daughters, I know not when my last hour may come. I wish to share my kingdom among you. You all love me, I know, but I wish to learn which loves me best, that her part may be the largest.' Our eldest daughter said, 'I love you best. I love you better than sugar or all the sweet things in the world.' Then the second said, 'I love you best. I love you better than beautiful clothes and gems, which are most dear to maidens.' But the youngest was silent. Then the king said, 'And you, dear child, how much do you love me?' 'I love you better than salt,' she said. This speech made her father very angry. 'Since you love me like salt,' he said, 'with salt shall your love be rewarded.' He shared his kingdom between our 2 other daughters. Then he had a bag of salt bound on the back of the youngest, and sent her alone into the forest. We wept and begged for her in vain. She herself wept, so that all the path was strewn with pearls which fell from her eyes. After a while, the king became sorry that he had been so harsh and sent to seek her, but she has never been heard of since. Sometimes I fear she was eaten by wild beasts. Sometimes I hope she is living safe in a cave or a hut with someone who found her. When I opened the box you brought, I found that it held a pearl like those my daughter used to weep. You may know that the sight moved my heart. Now tell me how you got that pearl. The young count told all that had happened in the woods. He said that the old woman seemed to be a witch, and with her lived an ugly goose girl, but of the king's daughter he had seen and heard nothing. The king and queen made up their minds to go and seek the old woman. Where the pearl was found, there might be found news of their daughter. For 2 days they wandered in search of the cottage. The count, being young and swift of foot, hurried forward seeking the right road. At last he found it and went on till it began to grow dark. He climbed into a great oak tree beside a brook to pass the night safe from wild beasts. Meanwhile, the old woman sat spinning at the door of her cottage. It began to grow dark, and the fire on the hearth gave a feeble light. All at once there was a noise outside. The geese were coming home from the meadow, cackling with all their might. The Goose Girl took them to their roosting place. Then she came in, and taking her wheel, sat down to spin. Thus she and the old woman sat for 2 hours without a word. At last something flapped against the window, and 2 bright eyes peeped in. It was a night owl, which screeched 3 times. The old woman looked up from her spinning. "Now, my daughter," she said, "it is time for you to go to your nightly task." The Goose Girl got up and went across the meadow. On and on she went, till she reached a brook near which stood a great oak tree. Just then the full moon came out from behind a cloud, and shone so bright that one could have seen by its light to pick up a pin. Then a wonderful thing happened. The Goose Girl drew off an ugly mask which she wore over her face. She washed it in the brook and laid it on the meadow to dry. Then she stooped and began to bathe herself in the brook. But how changed she was! You would never have known the poor Goose Girl. Instead of coarse black locks, her hair fell in curls like a shower of gold. Between the curls her eyes shone like stars. Her brow was white as snow, and her cheeks pink like apple blossoms. But the maiden was as sad as she was fair. She moaned and sighed and wrung her hands. From her eyes fell tears which lay like pearls on the grass. All at once she heard a crack and a crash in the branches of the oak. At that moment a black cloud came over the moon. Up sprang the maiden, and she slipped on her mask. It was as if a light had been blown out by the wind. She ran home, trembling like an aspen leaf, and found the old woman standing before the door. She was about to tell what had happened, but the old woman said kindly, "I know all about it, my daughter." She then led the Goose Girl into the cottage and threw fresh sticks on the fire. But instead of sitting down to the wheel, she took a broom and began to sweep and dust. "The house must be all clean and neat," she said. "But, mother, why do you begin so late?" "What is the hour?" asked the old woman. "Not quite midnight, but the clock has struck 11, said the daughter. "Do you not remember," said the old woman, "at midnight you will have been with me 3 years? Your time is up. We can stay together no longer." "Alas, dear mother, will you drive me out?" asked the maiden. "Where shall I go? I have no home and no friends. I have obeyed you always, and you have been kind to me. Do not send me away now." "I shall no longer live here," said the old woman, "but this house must be clean when I leave. Do not hinder me in my work, and cease to fear for yourself. You shall find a home, and you shall be content with the reward which I give." "But tell me what is going to happen," begged the maiden. "You must not ask," said the old woman, "and hinder me no longer in my work. Pull off the mask from your face, and put on the silk dress which you wore when you came to me. Then stay in your room till I call you." Now the crack and the crash in the oak had been caused by the young count. He had sat in the oak tree a long time, but he could not sleep. At last he heard a light footstep under the tree. The moon came out, and he saw the Goose Girl. "Oh ho!" he said to himself. "Here comes one witch. The other is not far off." What was his surprise when the ugly Goose Girl laid aside her mask. How beautiful were her golden hair, and her bright eyes, and her fair skin! Hardly daring to breathe, he leaned forward to see her more plainly, but he leaned too far. The bough cracked with his weight, and he slipped to the ground. At that same moment came a dark cloud. When the moon shone out again, the maiden was gone. The young count hurried across the meadow, hoping to find her. He had not gone far when he saw before him 2 figures. They were the king and the queen, who had seen far off the light in the cottage window. The Count overtook them and told what he had seen beside the brook. "It is our daughter," said the Queen. Full of joy, they hurried on till they came to the cottage. There were the geese, each standing on one leg, with its head under its wing. Not one stirred at their coming. The three peeped in at the window. They saw the old woman again at her wheel. She did not raise her eyes from her work, but nodded her head now and then. The room was as neat and clean as it could be, but the Goose Girl was nowhere to be seen. They stood for some minutes looking in, then they knocked. "Come in," said the old woman. "I know who you are, and I was expecting you." Then the King and the Queen and the Count entered the room. The old woman turned to the King and said, "You might have saved yourself this journey had you not driven from home your loving and beautiful daughter. But I have kept her from all harm. For these 3 years she has tended my geese. Her face is as fair and her heart as pure as ever. But you have been justly punished for your unkindness by the sorrow you had to bear." Then she called, "Come out, my daughter." Out came the Goose Girl, now a princess in a silken gown, with golden hair and bright eyes. She kissed her father and mother, and they all cried for joy. But when she saw the young Count, she blushed as red as a rose without knowing why. After a while, the King said, "My dearest child, I have only my love to give you. I parted my kingdom between your 2 sisters." "She needs nothing," said the old woman. "I have kept for her the tears she has wept these 3 long years. They are pearls more beautiful than any in the sea. They are worth more than the whole of your kingdom. As a reward to her for tending my geese, I give her this house besides." At once the cottage was changed into a castle, with horses and servants, and all that heart could wish. And in course of time the princess married the young Count, and they lived in the castle, happy and content to the end of their days. That was kind of a strange one. I'm not quite sure what to think. But as always, I fear we have come to the end of our video. I wish you a wonderful day and a wonderful night. Sweet dreams.